everyone, in this video I'm going to show you guys how I incorporate digital backdrops in my work. So here we have a picture that I created at a workshop that I hosted in Norway a few years ago, and I thought this would be the perfect picture to show you, what we can do in terms of making it a little bit more extra. Now I've already gone ahead and retouched this image. I'm just going to turn the layers on and off so you can get a little sense of what I've done. There's some dodging and burning and some liquefying. Now if you want to know my entire retouching process, I would highly recommend you check out the retouching course that we also have on this platform. But we're going to jump into the digital backdrop and how we use it. So I'm going to start off by creating a new layer and making sure I stamp visible everything on top of it. Now to do that, you want to hit the shortcut Command Option Shift E, and all that really does is it takes all the information from that layer below and creates a brand new layer. And this way I can continue working in a very non-destructive way. Now for the next step, which is separating our subject from the background. So Photoshop has a very handy little tool which is right up here under Select and Subject. So when you click that, the subject is automatically selected by Photoshop. Now this is really fun because it's a very easy way that you can quickly separate the subject from the background, and it's pretty effective across a variety of images. Once the subject is selected, you're going to go down here in your layers panel and click on this little icon that creates a layer mask. I'm going to just actually click underneath and create a solid color layer, and this will just give us an idea as to what is happening in this layer mask. So this is just a guide, so I'm just going to push this to maybe like a gray or a white, just so that we can really differentiate between the background and our subject. I'm going to hit OK. Now clicking on this layer mask, I'm going to go and zoom in and show you what it's selected. It's had a good go at it, but it's not quite perfect. Now with this solid color, I can actually move it around so I can really see. So maybe something like that. Making sure that my layer mask is selected, I will always make sure that my opacity is set to 100 and my flow is set to anywhere between 10 to 100 as well. Now I will just start tweaking this layer mask. In order to do so, it's really good to just zoom in and get stuck in. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is literally how I would just go back and forth between the black and white brush to show and hide what is on this layer mask. I will quickly brush, and as you can see, with just a few brush strokes, we can tidy up the layer mask, which is exactly what we want. So I'm just going to keep zooming in and making sure that my brush is set to 0% hardness. The only thing I'm really modifying at this point is the size. So I'm making it bigger, smaller, and I'm just doing like a very quick brush. And again, this is because this is for demonstration purposes. If I was doing this in my own time, I would certainly recommend taking your time in this process. This is just where, the fun happens, spending time in the details like this. So Photoshop did the main job, and now it is our job here to just go in there and very quickly tidy it up. There's a few here that I won't get into, and I think that's just because I know the background I'm going to use is darker, so I can always come back to it because it's a very non-destructive process. So I'm just going to come down here, push that to 100 just to see what's going on. Lightly brush, flicking between my black and my white brush tool. And when I'm happy with that, very lightly brushing everything, I will zoom out. That's pretty much good enough for now, and it's time to add our backdrops. Now this is genuinely the really fun part. So I have a few backdrops open over here, and these are from the Floral Stories collection. We have Autumn Rouge, Shadow Bloom, Sweet Valentine, and Unfurl. And the reason why I thought a floral backdrop would suit really nicely is because of the layers of her dress and her hair. It all seems very like fluffy. So I thought flowers would look quite nice with that. I'm just going to brush this corner back. I realized that I hadn't done that. There we go. Okay, so we'll start with Unfurl. I will go ahead and just hit Command A. And what that does is it selects everything in that layer. And then I will just hit Command C, a simple copy. I'll jump back into this image and hit Command V, which is paste. And the background is pasted into this image. I'll then go ahead and grab that layer and pull it underneath the subject layer. And as you can see, we're now getting an indication into whether or not that works. I'm going to jump into Sweet Valentine and grab that one. Just copy and pasting it here. You can go ahead and actually move this around and change the size of it too. Now each background is around between 6,000 to 8,000 pixels wide on the long edge, so there is ample enough space for you to like expand it or make it smaller according to your image. I think this is far too busy, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. So I'll select this one and see how Shadow Bloom fares. Copy and paste. Okay, I actually quite like that. I think that looks really nice. I'm going to move it around a little bit, make it a little bit bigger, so it feels like she's really like in the opulence of the flowers. And again, this is all very much on your own personal preference. A lot of people will take their time at this stage, and I do recommend it. Now our subject and our background are together, but we need to unite them a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and just change the colors on our subject to match her to the background. Now to do that, one of my favorite adjustment layers is to go into the color balance. I will then attach that adjustment to our subject. So I'll hit option, and once I hit option and move my mouse between the layers, you can see this little icon, and that means it wants to attach. So click on that, and now that adjustment layer is attached to the subject. Now in the midtones, I would just push and pull the colors to connect our subject to the background. Now the colors in the background, I can see that the midtones are in the warm tone palette. So while I'm here in the midtone, I will just move the adjustments to a more warm tone palette. And already I can see the connection between our subject and background happening. I will then go into the shadows. I can see in the background that the shadows are a little bit more in the cool tone, so therefore that means I will push the colors into the blues and into the greens. So I will just move this around very gently, just sort of looking at what's happening to the skin and looking at what's happening to the hair as well. So again, you can come back and modify these at any time because, you know, it's an adjustment layer and that's what they're there for. And now the highlights I can see are in the warm tone palette in the background, so therefore for my subject I will move them towards that direction too. So I'll move the cursor here a little bit more to the green and then definitely over to the yellow as well, and I'll turn this off and on, and you can see the big difference. The background now looks connected to our subject a lot more. Okay, so when you're happy with that, what I would also recommend is jumping back into your background layer, and I will actually go ahead and label that background so that it's all very clear what we're doing here. Now in the background layer, I would recommend blurring it just a little bit. And this is just to give it sort of like that natural feeling, unless you are actually going for a very flat visual look. And that's obviously your choice as an artistic style. I always think since you're shooting with a camera, there's always going to be a little bit of like blurry bokeh fall off. So therefore I always add a little bit of blur to the backgrounds. So I'm just going to show you how I would do that. So making sure that my background is selected, I'm going to go up here to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and then just play with the radius of this just to see what's happening. As you can see, if I move this over to like 30, it's far too blurry and it doesn't really make sense. So I'm just going to reduce the blur to maybe somewhere around 5 so that the flowers are still very visible, but they're just a little bit out of focus, as would naturally happen if you were taking this photo in real life. And then I'm going to hit OK. Next thing I'm going to do is add a little layer at the back. Now this is a really sneaky little trick, but it does help marry the subject to the background. So we're going to go to the adjustment panel, go to curves, and then drag the center point of the curves down just a little bit. Now making sure that the layer mask is selected, I'm going to invert that so it's hiding. And now with a white brush, I'm going to very lightly make that quite fluffy and big. Reduce the flow to around 9%. And now lightly, I'm going to go and brush behind our subject. And all I'm doing here is almost trying to create the feeling of the shadow of our subject on the background. And then we'll turn this off and on to see if it made a difference. It made a slight difference. So now that that is done, the colors are looking harmonious now. This is where you can now get started with your color toning process. So that's how I would incorporate the backgrounds into my studio work. I'm going to show you guys the before and where we started. So this is where we started, and this is where we ended up with not a lot of effort. In the next video that I will make, I'll be showing you guys how I color tone this picture using our actions. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this helpful.